them out of Egypt and so forth. If you turn to Deuteronomy chapter 7, we'll use this as introduction. Deuteronomy chapter 7. And of course in Jeremiah's day, as well as in our day, there was a lot of idolatry going on. And the sad part is even among God's people, there was idolatry going on. That is, people worshiping, God's people worshiping false gods. And in fact, Ezekiel depicts this probably through chapters 8 through 11 of his book. And, Ezekiel is taken and he's shown the temple, and there's false gods. There's images inside the temple, and the people are worshiping them instead of Jehovah. But in Deuteronomy chapter 7, beginning in verse 6, "You are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples of the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love on you, nor choose you because you were more in number than any other people, for you were the least of all peoples. But because the Lord loves you, and because he would keep the oath which he swore to your fathers, the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And therefore know that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and mercy for 1,000 generations with those who love him and keep his commandments. And he repays those who hate him to their face, to destroy them. He will not be slack with him who hates him. He will repay him to his face. Therefore you shall keep the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments which I command you to observe this day." And then he goes on to say, "Then it shall come to pass," and he lists all these blessings and stuff, "if they keep his word." And Deuteronomy was written right before the children of Israel under Moses. Of course, he would die before that, but they're under Moses right now. And in fact, that title, Deuteronomy, means second law. Deuteros means second, nomos is law. And it's second law is literally what the name of the book means. And it's the second giving of the law is more appropriate because he is giving, because what happened to the first generation of those that went into the, wilderness wander? Yeah, they died in the wilderness, remember? God gave them that land, but because of unbelief, Joshua and Caleb were the only two that said we could take the land. And so they were to wander in that wilderness 40 years, and then all men of fighting men 20 years and upward were to die in the wilderness, except for two, Joshua and Caleb. And that's a whole good story in and of itself. But anyway, so Moses is telling them this before that second generation goes into that promised land under the leadership of Joshua. But those principles there, in fact, verse 9, "Therefore know that the Lord your God, he is God," which is pretty much our lesson right here with Jeremiah. And so we'll use that as an introduction. Now in Jeremiah chapter 10, let's see here, okay. Fools, I would have put fools follow idols. But yeah, the major headings here in our class are the same major headings from the book here. And so, the book is mainly for you to read between now and next Sunday. Although sometimes we do refer to things in the book. But, as I always say, as long as you got this is the book we want right here, the 66. All right, but anyway. So fools go after idols in Jeremiah 10. And if you look at Jeremiah 10, might as well read verse 1 and 2. "Hear the word which the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel." All right. House of Israel. Just as a sideline note, remember the kingdom divided. Rehoboam and Jeroboam and all those guys. And, of course, the northern kingdom was spoken of as Israel. Well, before the dividing of the kingdom, they were known as Israel. And they were always known as Israel in God's eyes, even though they were divided kingdoms. But the northern kingdom has already been taken captive 120 years or so before this. But yet he still refers to Judah, the southern kingdom, as the house of Israel, because it's still his people. All right, just a sideline note. All right, verse 2, "Thus says the Lord, do not learn the way of the Gentiles. Do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the Gentiles are dismayed at them. For the customs of the peoples are futile. For one cuts a tree from the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it will not topple. They are upright like a palm tree, and they cannot speak. They must be carried because they cannot go by themselves. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, nor can they do good. All right, and he's talking there about idols. We'll see that in just a moment here, even more so. But thus says the Lord, notice, learn not the ways of the Gentiles. And then he says right there, well, you have the Gentiles underneath that. Gentiles is highlighted too. But do not learn the way of the Gentiles. And again, don't be like the world. Too many times the church looks to the world for its wisdom, for its answers, for solutions, but that's not the way God ever intended it. But it's nothing new with people of our age. You know, they did it way back then. But he tells them, do not learn the way of the Gentiles. Do not be dismayed at the signs from heaven. Now, the signs from heaven, and he does have a pretty good quote in here on that, if I can find the page here. The signs of heaven, well, he talks about astrology and the stars and all that kind of stuff. Man cannot be faithful to the true living God while living in the world of serving other gods. Well, that's not it there, but signs from heaven. Page 36, okay, there it is right there. Oh, yeah, at the top there. They believe that extraordinary signs in the sky, such as eclipses, comets, or an unusual conjunction of stars, were the work of malevolent, the opposite of benevolent, malevolent forces, and they were terrified of them. They also studied the sun, moon, and stars for signs supposedly revealed by them, and often worshiped them as deities. Then he says, such phenomena might have terrified pagans, but they should not have frightened the covenant people. God created the heavenly bodies and therefore was in control of them. They were not to be worshipped or feared. And so he talks about those astrological signs. Now, in our day and age, you know, we can tell when a comet is going to come. You'll hear on the news, you know, such and such a comet is coming. And, you know, my biggest memory of a comet is the Hale-Bopp comet. Remember the Hale-Bopp comet? It was about 15, 20 years ago. And one thing associated with that, remember there was that cult, I forgot what they call themselves now, but they wore black sweatsuits and black sneakers, and they drank the poison when the comet came. You know, I remember that, but my most memorable, the reason why I remember the comet, though, it's probably the only comet that I've ever really remember seeing, because, you know, before Jimmy came along, I used to go hunting with Mr. Paul Thornhill, you know, but then he had to, you know, learn his new son-in-law. But anyway, so we're way out in the sticks, about 5 o'clock in the morning, dark as can be, and so I'm standing out there by the side, you know, but anyway, so I look up, and you know, the sky's really dark out there. I look up, there's this just beautiful, like, wow. And at first, it kind of like startled me, but then I remembered, oh, wait, that's the Hale-Bopp comet. Wow, that's pretty cool. And, but, you know, we know when those things are coming, but if you had no idea that thing was coming, and all of a sudden you look up in the sky and see it, you're like, wow, that must be the gods or something. Or if you lived up north, how many of you have ever seen those Aurora Borealis things? You know, we have, and I remember I lived in Apollo Beach when I was a little kid, and we heard the Air Force was doing something or another, but they were here in Florida. A couple nights we'd go out on our dock, look over the water, and we'd see the sky colored up like that. Well, if you had no idea what that was, and all of a sudden you see this, you're thinking, wow, that must be the gods. There must be something going on in the heavens or something like that. And when I was little, I think I've mentioned this before in sermon illustrations, we lived in Kingsport, Tennessee, and I remember we went to go see an eclipse. And of course, I was a little kid, probably 4 or 5 years old at the time, and we go to a park, and because we knew when it was going to happen, my parents took us there, my brother and I, you know, we know when it's going to happen and all that, and we're sitting there, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's like noon or 1 o'clock, bright sunny day, and all of a sudden it's dark as can be. And even though I knew it was coming, even though I'd been wanting, you know, it's coming, I was scared to death. I remember that, being scared to death for that 5 minutes or whatever it was dark during noon. Well, if you didn't know anything about an eclipse, and all of a sudden it's an eclipse and it's dark, you know, stuff like that just freak you out, make you afraid. And so that's what he's talking about here with these signs of heavens. For the Gentiles are dismayed at them. And, well, you know, we don't have anything to fear because we have God on our side, Christians and all that. And, of course, we know, you know, all the, you know, hocus pocus, you know, voodoo, all hoodoo stuff, all that stuff is taken out because we know it's just a natural phenomena that happens. And so it's not really a sign of the gods or whatever, God's mad or God's partying or whatever it might be. We know that. And of course we know that, from the news and science and all that stuff. But even if we didn't know that, we don't have to fear because we know God's in control. Or at least we should know God is in control. But when people are overcome with the world, when they're worldly, when they're following the ways of the Gentiles, then they lose track that God is for real, that God is in control. And sometimes we can do that as well when we get too caught up in the world. All right, for the Gentiles are dismayed at them. Oh yeah, for one cuts a tree from the forest. All right, and so cutting down a tree from the forest. All right, now, and I suppose this passage might still be used by some to say Christmas trees are sinful, because here, see, Jeremiah speaks against Christmas trees, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But as you see from the context, he's talking about idolatry. He's talking about idols. You go cut a tree down, you make an idol out of it. Notice they declare it, or they decorate it with silver and gold and so forth, but they cannot speak. Yeah, these idols, they cannot speak. They decorate it with gold and silver. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it will not topple. They are upright like a palm tree, but yet they cannot speak. Notice they cannot, look at the things they cannot do. They cannot go by themselves. They cannot do evil, nor can they do any good. It's just a piece of wood. And I think I mentioned this in Jeremiah a couple weeks ago, but when I first went to Ghana, West Africa, they have a lot of what they call the animism. They call it over there fetish religions. I don't know, fetish I thought was what people have with shoes or something like that, but I don't know where that comes from. But anyway, tribal religions and textbooks are be called animism, and that's where nature becomes God and all that. And so Bob Bauer, who preaches in Auberdale, he's the one I always go with. And so he would say, he told us, he says, we have a meeting lined up to go visit the fetish priest, and he's going to show us the idols. So I'm thinking, this is going to be good, man, it's going to be some gold stuff and really cool looking things and all that. Well, you get there and all it is a gourd, all right? A gourd with a couple spots painted on it. Not like a face or anything, just a gourd with some spots. And that's their idol. That's what they worship. And then they'll have an altar there that might be a broken Coke bottle stuck in the concrete with these little shells around it. Just like, what? Now, a beautiful gold statue is still like, why would you worship that? But this is like, what? And so it's I was very disappointed, but anyway, but that just goes to show the nature of the thing. But that thing can't do a thing. That gourd, it doesn't talk. It doesn't move. In fact, they got to clean the cobwebs off it, I'm sure, every once in a while. It doesn't do a thing. But yet to them, it holds all that power. It holds all that better behave yourself in front of it type of stuff. Better, and of course what their offerings are, a lot of times they'll pour whiskey on there or alcoholic beverage on there. That's their offering to it. Sometimes they'll put money or food there, but it can't eat. It can't drink. Can't do any of that stuff.
I used to go to a nail salon that had Buddha there and fresh fruit. And I asked about it one time, and they said it's our offering.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Well, there's a Chinese place right down here, Peking House. They got a Buddha right by the cash register. And this one guy, we used to go there. I've been going there for a long time, since I was a student here in 89 to 91. But, I had this one guy, he'd always throw a penny, where the Buddha thing is. Because you got sitting there with the big belly in his arms like this, and then there's money right there. And so it's like, he just did it as a joke for entertainment purposes, but people put it there as like an offering. Well, like you say, what do they do with that? Because I know those pennies overflow, so that they must put that in the cash register in their pocket or something, but it's the kind of ridiculousn's of it. Mm-hmm.
On the practical side of that today, in places like India and around there, you have people starving to death.
Oh, yeah.
The cattle and the monkeys are running rampant. And
Yeah.
they feed those people,
Right.
yet they worship.
Right. Yeah, it's just terrible. And so they do that to their own destruction, to their own hurt. But such is the way it is with false religion. All right. Also look at this passage here in Isaiah chapter 46. Isaiah 46, he talks about that as well. Kind of more explicit maybe, Isaiah chapter 46, verses 5 through 7. To whom will you liken me and make me equal, and compare me that we should be alike? They lavish gold out of the bag and weigh silver in the scales. They hire a goldsmith, and he makes it a god. They prostrate themselves, yes, they worship. They bear it on the shoulder, they carry it, and set it in place, and it stands. From its place it shall not move. Though one cries out to it, yet it cannot answer, nor save him out of his trouble. And so it's just made of material things. It has no power in it at all. In fact, they have to carry it around on their shoulders. It can't even move by itself. They have to make a cart for it to pull it along. And so, idolatry is just not, as the title section was, fools follow idolatry or something like that. It's just there's no power in idolatry. All right, now let's take a look at this Christmas tree. As I mentioned here, I know first time I ever heard this, it was from the Jehovah's Witnesses that came knocking at the door, and they said you can't have a Christmas tree because Jeremiah speaks out against it. As you see, that's just, he's talking about idolatry made out of wood. Some of them are made out of stone and so forth. But what about Christmas trees and moral decision making? And these 3 points I bring up quite a bit in relation to other things, and you'll see the point. Is it sinful to have a Christmas tree, for example? And really anything you want to ask yourself, is this sinful? Is it okay for me to do this? These questions apply to that. All right, number 1, is it inherently sinful? All right, now inherent means something by its nature. Is it by its nature sinful? Now things like fornication, and the way I like to illustrate this is like in Galatians chapter 5, 19 and following, you have the works of the flesh and the works of the Spirit. Or actually, the lust of the flesh and the works of the Spirit. No, fruit of the Spirit. There you go. The works of the flesh, or the lust of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. All right, well, the lust of the flesh, adultery, fornication, those kind of things. In other words, it's never right. It's always wrong to commit fornication. Always. There's no good time to do it. It's always going to be sinful, and the other things listed there. On the other hand, love, joy, peace, etc., it's always right to love. It's never wrong to love. So love, for example, agape love is something that is inherently good. Fornication, adultery, etc., that he names there, that's always evil. All right? Now, most things in life, and so, is it inherently sinful? Well, is a Christmas tree inherently sinful? That is, by its very nature, is it sinful? And of course, no, it's just a big Christmas decoration is all it is. Now, it can be sinful in this field of morality, ethics, and all that, inherent versus instrumental. Instrumental is it can be used in a sinful way, but is it inherently, by its very nature, sinful? And of course not, no. Then the next question we ask ourselves, does it violate my conscience? It might, and it might not. And this is all individual. Once you get past number 1, if the answer to number 1 is no, then you don't do it. If the answer is yes, it is inherently sinful, then you don't do it. Fornication, you stop right there. Don't do it. You don't go any further. It's kind of like if it was a flow chart, yes, no, this way. All right? Then from the question 2 and 3 are purely, question 1 is 2 is individual. Does it violate my conscience? It might, but it might not. But one thing we also got to note, if it, because it violates my conscience, doesn't mean it should violate yours. In other words, if your conscience isn't violated by it, but my conscience is, my conscience is not the standard of morality for everybody. So I cannot say you're going to hell because you don't agree with me and that conscience. In other words, I can't force my conscience on somebody else. And a perfect example of that, in fact, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 8 because it involves idolatry, what we're talking about right now. 1 Corinthians chapter 8. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, Paul is in a section of Corinthians that began in chapter 7 where he is answering questions that they had asked him. And we don't have the exact questions, but by his answers to those questions, we pretty much know the question. But notice he says in verse 8, moreover, brethren, that's 2 Corinthians. Let me get over here. 1 Corinthians 8. Now concerning things offered to idols. We know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. And therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is no other God but one. That's really Jeremiah's lesson. For even if there were so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we for him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, and through whom we live. However, there is not in every one that knowledge, for some with conscience of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we eat not are we the worse. But beware, lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who has knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died. But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against God. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. All right, a lot of stuff there, but he's asked, is it okay to eat things offered to idols? Now, in first century Corinth, as well as in the first century period, meat wasn't the most common food. And usually, if they went to the market to buy meat, that meat was for sale, had already been used for a pagan ritual, idolatry, especially in a place like Corinth. And so the question is, can a Christian go to the market, buy meat that was used for an idolatrous worship service, and take it home and eat it? And the answer to the question, Paul says, is yes, there's nothing inherently sinful about eating that meat. However, if it causes my brother to stumble, who, because of his weak conscience, thinks of it as eating something to the idol, then Paul says, I will never eat meat again. But notice in verse 8 there, food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we eat not are we the worse. In other words, it doesn't matter to God whether we eat meat or not. I know Dr. Deborah don't like that, but that's the way it is, No, just kidding. Fish is okay. All right, anyway. But no, eating meat doesn't make us better, doesn't make us worse. God doesn't care. We can be vegetarians, we can be pescatarians, we can be, what do you call those other guys? Eat tofu or fufu? Anyway, what do you call that? Vegans. There you go, vegans. There you go. I guess that's an in-between, but I'm ignorant on that kind of stuff maybe. But, it doesn't make us any better or worse whether we're vegetarians, at least in the eyes of God. Now, of course, health-wise, a different story, some good stuff there. But, so far as God goes. But I can eat it with good conscience, then I can eat it. But if it causes someone to sin, and that brings us to this next point, does it damage my Christian influence? In this case, it could, eating meat, but it doesn't, if it causes my brother to sin, then Paul says he won't do it. And so when we think about that with the Christmas tree, is it inherently sinful? No. Does it violate my conscience? Only you can answer that for yourself. Does it damage my Christian influence? It may. It may very well do that. Depends on what the situation is. We had a student way a long time ago when I first started teaching in 1996, and he was from Africa, and Liberia, I think was it. And he was an older fella, and so he had been around in the church for a while, and he had talked about this missionary that came over there. And the missionary was from the States, and he had him a little house and stuff in a village and all that. And he, around Christmas time, he put up a Christmas tree and lights and all that. And the brethren over there told him and said, over here, don't do that, because, they associate that with Catholicism and all this kind of thing. And the preacher insisted, well, no, I have a right to do this, just like with Paul in the meeting, I have a right to do this and all that. So he said, I'm going to keep it up and teach them. Well, guess what? That guy had no influence at all, and he lasted maybe another year or less, and he was gone, and it really hurt the church. It damaged the church. And you know the old expression, when in Rome, do as the Romans. And even in 1 Corinthians 9, the chapter right after that, is all about just because we have a right to do something doesn't mean we have to do it. And so it's better to keep peace and to promote the gospel than it is to have my own way. But a lot of times we get that messed up and think that my way is most important and all that. Mm-hmm.
When I first became a Christian, someone came to my house and I had a Christmas tree up. And they said, you put up a tree? Oh, I don't know. I was horrified. Never put up one since.
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, just kind of a sideline note, and maybe some of the older people in here, though I'm not real old, though my gray hair's gray. Of course, real old is all relative, right? But I remember when I was first baptized, first became a member of the church in 1982. It was almost like a cuss word to even say the word Christmas. Christ Mass. You got told out that you can't do that. That's Christ Mass. But now from that same group of people, though some of them are probably dead now, but from that same group of people now, they insist on saying Christmas. Because, when people tell them you can't use Christ and all that, they say, I'm going to use Christmas, And so now they say it. Well, those are just words,
I just think that right now the thing that drives me wild is OMG.
Well, that's a whole other issue right there. But nowadays people say, in other words, there's a lot of pride, and I won't, if it's arrogant, it's between them and God. But there's a lot of pride. People saying Merry Christmas. I'm not going to say season's greetings because I'm going to say Christmas. But that's from that same crowd that Christmas is almost a cuss word 30 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever. That's just an observation. But anyway, right here, these, and again, whether it's Christmas tree, whether it's, whatever, ask yourself these three questions. Is it inherently sinful? Does it violate my conscience? Does it damage my Christian influence? And if we ask ourselves those and answer them honestly and scripturally, that is, I guess we'll call that, when I teach ethics, I have a different name for this, but I forget what I call it now, but criteria for moral decision making or something like that. But I haven't taught ethics in a while. So anyway, all right, any questions or comments on that? Okay, but again, all that showing that only fools follow idolatry. All right, the next section, the everlasting King. Inasmuch as there is none like you, O Lord, you are great, and your name is great in might. In might, who would not fear you, O King of the nations? For this is your rightful due. For among all the wise men of the nations and in all their kingdoms there is none like you. But they are altogether dull-hearted and foolish. A wooden idol is a worthless doctrine. Silver is beaten into place. It is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz, the work of the craftsmen and of the hands of the metalsmith. Blue and purple are their clothing. And again, this is talking about the idol. They are all the work of skillful men. But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. And his wrath, or at his wrath, the earth will tremble, and the nations will not be able to endure his indignation. Thus you shall say to them, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth shall perish, the gods that have not made the heavens and earth shall perish from the earth and from under these heavens. All right? But again, the everlasting King. Now notice the contrast to the idols. God is contrasted to idols. Okay? Now notice there's none like you. And then he says that again, there's none like you. And in the midst of that, and compared to the idols, you are great, and your name is great in might. Notice he calls him the King of the nations, And even, he is even over nations that don't submit to him. He's still king over them. And I think we had a reference to this one of the other lessons. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's going to be featured in a lesson. But, Jeremiah will say a few times throughout his book, God, nations rise and fall. And I'm paraphrasing, nations rise and they fall at the bidding of God. God causes nations to rise. He causes them to fall. I know Proverbs 14:34, righteousness exalts a nation. Sin is a reproach to any people. And so, that's something that we have to think about there, that he's in control, even those nations. And, one day, one of these days on the sign out there, it's going to say, even the lawless are subject to God's law. They may not think they are. They may think they can escape, but, there's a judgment day coming that they won't. Just like here in Jeremiah, they might think these things, but that's not the case at all. And there's no way they should be thinking those things if they would follow God and stick close to His Word. But He is the King of nations.
Isaiah 55:8-9.
Yeah, His thoughts.
My thoughts are not your thoughts, nor your ways.
Right.
My ways, saith the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
The heavens are higher than the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So my ways higher than your ways.
Yes.
My thoughts and your
Yes.
thoughts. Right there would let us know.
Right. And of course, in the context of Isaiah, should our thoughts be His thoughts? Should our ways be His ways? Yes, they should be. And He's saying to them in Isaiah, they're rebellious just like the people in Jeremiah. His thoughts should be our thoughts. Our ways should be His ways. But when we fail to focus in on God, they're not. We go our own way. There's a way that seems right unto a man, but then thereof are the ways. In fact, Jeremiah 10:23, that's in the same chapter here. Look at that. There's that. Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's not in man that walks, but it's in the Lord. Not in the idols that man has made, but in the Lord. And that's pretty cool right there. All right, anyway. Okay, so He's King of the nations. Notice also, but they are altogether dull heart and foolish. Now, who are the they? The idols. And He says there the wooden idol is a worthless doctrine. Look at that. That's pretty cool. An idol is a thing, but yet He calls it a worthless doctrine. Why suppose He would call that a worthless doctrine? Yeah, the idol represents a teaching. Yeah, that's another thing. No one practices religion, period, unless they've been taught. Whether it's denominationalism, whether it's true religion, whether it's, Buddhism, whatever it is, idolatry, it's taught. It's taught. Now, people, can be spiritual and, I guess, do things. In fact, anytime I study on idolatry, I'll just give you a little personal story when I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, we went to Dominican Republic. Can you imagine that? I don't know what my parents were thinking. I guess it was cheap or something. I don't know. We go to Dominican Republic, and I think I'm 12 years old or something like that. My brother's a year, 15 months older than me, actually. And, they gave us each a $20 bill and sent us loose on the town. Can you imagine that? I'm lucky to get out of there alive, I'm telling you. I could tell you some stuff. Man, woo. Anyway, but one thing I brought back, there's a little tiki doll. You know what a little tiki doll is? A little tiki thing, a little necklace, being, cool, walk around with the little tiki thing on there, Well, I was kind of worshiping that thing, like it was some kind of god. And then all of a sudden, at least I was thinking anyway, all of a sudden a lot of these bad things were happening and stuff. Now, whether real or imagined, I don't know. And so our dog died. 13 years we had that dog, so we really had him almost my whole life. In fact, I do remember the time we didn't have him, so I must have been like 15 then or something. Anyway, and so I remember we buried the dog, and I threw that thing in the grave with the dog. My dad, and he buried the dog by the mango tree, okay, in Apollo Beach. But anyway, and so that's my experience with idolatry, okay? And so I never have like tiki dolls, just bad memories, But anyway, and I don't know that I was necessarily taught that, but I didn't really formally worship it, but that was like, my idol. And then, but anyway, no one wakes up with a gourd as an idol unless somebody taught them. Nobody lays down on a mat facing east 5 times a day unless somebody taught them. nobody's baptized into Christ for the remission of their sins unless somebody taught them. And so religion is a teaching, and so an idol is a worthless doctrine. And I mentioned this a week or two ago, but a lot of times in the prophets, when it talks about the lie, he's talking about idolatry, because it's a lie. There's nothing in that God. There's nothing in those trees that are decked with gold and purple and all that. There's nothing in that. There's no power in that at all. A lie. Mm-hmm.
Believe that people today that see power and money as
Oh, yeah.
and still,
Mm-hmm.
go to church. Do you believe that they know that that's idolatry?
They probably don't. I don't know. Colossians 3:5, Paul says covetousness, which is idolatry. I don't know. Really, the broader question is, does any idolater know it's idolatry? In other words, they think they're doing what's right. I guess most of the time. Maybe not, though. There could be people that know it's not right but still do it. But that's a good question. I don't know.
It's not taught, or, well,
No.
it is taught. Maybe God did.
Yeah. I remember Brother B.C. Carr used to tell us, when he was talking about, withdrawing fellowship, when he teach on withdrawing fellowship and stuff, he would say something like, covetousness, some sins like covetousness, you can't always tell a person is covetous. Now, sometimes you can, for sure, but sometimes you can't always tell. But then he said, just think if we withdrew fellowship from people who were covetous, man, half our pews would be cleared out, maybe, but but that is a good question. I'm not sure if they think that or not.
1 Timothy 6:9, that they will be rich and fall into temptation and snare, into the most foolish and harmful love, which drown men in contrition and destruction.
Yeah.
For the love of money is the root of all evil,
Yeah.
which some have coveted after. They have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows.
Yeah.
So if you got a lot of sorrows, then you know.
Yeah, and I like that one phrase in there.
No,
No, the one that relates really to idolatry. Yeah, they read it again. Not the whole thing, but keep reading from the beginning, and I'll tell you. No, never mind. They drown themselves. I said, drown themselves in many foolish and hurtful lusts. The same thing the idolaters do. They drown themselves with that because when they follow that idol. All right. Question? Yeah. Yeah. In fact, and Virginia mentioned that she had talking to a lady who's a member of the Catholic Church and asked her why she attended the Catholic Church, and the answer was because I love all those statues and stuff, which reminded me that there was a big controversy. I forget what year. It seemed like it was around 1000 A.D., called the Iconoclastic controversy. They had a name for it too, from a person's name, I think. But it's really, I think it was one of the difference between the Greek Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church when they had to split the schism back then, because those that became the Greek Orthodox Church, they don't have the statues, at least as many, and nowadays as many. But that was a big controversy because it looked as if the Catholic Church was worshiping idols, because you had the statue of Mary and all these statues and stuff all around their buildings and all that. And that was a big controversy in church history. But, and so there, to ask that question, do you think that they think they're being idolatrous? They probably don't think that. No, they don't think that. But they are, the objective third party outside looking in, it looks like they're worshiping statues. Go ahead, Fred.
They don't have the ability to. They don't know Scripture.
Right. But they've been taught. Right.
Exactly. The Pope is law. He said,
Right. Yeah.
going down.
Go ahead, Fred. Right, artifacts, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They worship the Shroud of Turin and they don't
No, yeah. Yeah, how many, yeah.
I said this Friday, when I went back to the Catholic Church, of course, two popes ago changed so much, but anyway, I went because my grandson was serving as an altar worship. I'm not using the holy water, I'm not genuflecting, I'm not staying the rosary or anything. Somebody at the table asked me and said, what is that holy water? Where does that come from? I said, the faucet.
The faucet, yeah. He was probably looking for some big theological answer, the faucet. Yeah, that's good. All right, but yeah, anyway, gold from, and the point of mentioning where the silver comes from, where the gold comes from, is these places were known as the best silver, the best gold came from these places. Now, where have we heard Tarshish before? Saul? No. No, that's Tarsus. This is Tarshish. Somebody say? Jonah. Remember Jonah when he was trying to get out of Dodge? He got on a ship to go to Tarshish, and that's and really we don't know exactly where it was, but it's somewhere over in Spain, Portugal, somewhere in that area, which that was the most western known place to the Mediterranean world, at least the Palestinians in that day and age. All right, but these are the top spots for that. Notice all this idolatry is the work of sinful man, the work of sinful man. We didn't even get into Acts chapter 17, but Paul, when he was on Mars Hill, remember he gave them that sermon about the true God. He said, he introduced that sermon by he looked everywhere and the place was taken in idolatry. He says, you even have an altar to the unknown God. Him, therefore, I declare unto you. And then he just flat out preached on the true God. Didn't mention Jesus at all until the very last verse of that sermon recorded for us. And then only to confirm that he is going to judge the world by the one whom he has raised from the dead. He still never mentioned Jesus by name, and that tells me something that when we teach people, we have to start where they are. And he was speaking to a bunch of philosophers on Mars Hill in Acts 17. Also note, but all they are the work of the sinful men, and the they there is the idols, but the Lord is the true God. Now look at what he is. He's the true God. He is the living God. He is the everlasting King. An idol doesn't even come close to any of those. Okay? An idol's not true. It's deception. Go ahead.
Brian, you said sinful men, skillful men.
Oh, skillful. Okay, I see that.
And the interesting thing about that is skillful would denote that they are educated, wise people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they that wise that they cannot understand the word of God?
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, skillful. That screen's really dark. Compare this one, but yeah, skillful. But the whole point is, even if it's made by the best of men, by the best of materials, it's nothing. Go ahead, and then we'll get Bobby.
Like in Acts, I believe it's chapter 19, where Paul gets into it with Demetrius and all the silversmiths.
Yeah, making idols. That's right. Yeah.
They were building shrines to
Yeah.
Diana,
Yeah.
which was a goddess.
Absolutely.
They got the people all upset.
Mm-hmm.
Great is Diana
Of the Ephesians, that's right. And that's what got him in trouble. And from there to the end of Acts, he's in trouble all the time. All the time. All right. But the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth shall perish. But God, the true God, the living God, the everlasting King, he did make the heavens and the earth. And the heavens and the earth still stand today as a testimony of the true God. Now, sometimes we get so smart that we think we know better than God. Go ahead, Bobby, you had a comment?
Same thing as Frank just said.
Okay, very good. Yep. All right. All right, very good. Okay, and then this last point, he has made the earth by his power. He has established the world. Well, I guess we're about ready to run out of time. By his wisdom, he has stretched out the heavens at his discretion. When he utters his voice, there's a multitude of waters in the heavens, and he causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain. He brings the wind out of his treasuries. Everyone is dull-hearted without knowledge. Every metalsmith is put to shame by an image, for his molten image is falsehood, and there is no breath in them. They are futile, the work of heirs, and the time of their punishment they shall perish. The portion of Jacob, the portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the maker of all things, and Israel is the tribe of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. Well, we're out of time, but you see the greatness of God, especially compared to the idols. Thank you for your attention.